Tonight, he's drunk. I got a new.
Hey there, YouTube. SkepticalRoot. Gender. Usage of the term gender and sex. And what the heck I'm talking about. I want to talk about the conflation that there is between the terms gender and sex in English in particular, and why so many people who have grown up under what is essentially a Protestant Christian ideology, I guess, in education and society, are so confused by the terms gender and sex. This is not going to be about redefining terms or anything like that. This is about what they are and to help clear up maybe some confusion. So, you may or may not agree, but this is what I've got. This is my take on it, based on what I have learned about, read about, and understand. So, human beings are sexually dimorphic. We have two sexes, male and female. Imagine a continuum, two bell curves that do not overlap of male and female characteristics. Okay? There are people who fall outside of either curve, depending on what you put, how you define male and female, whether it's sexual organs or chromosomes or whatever. You have asex and you have intersex, specifically. But from the 10-foot level, you've got two. You have a sexual binary. Different, however, than gender. But we'll talk about the gender binary as well. So, gender traditionally is used to describe characteristics of a sex group, male or female. Gender would be like masculine, and gender would be like feminine. Okay? So, things that were masculine, like weapons or structures, like in most Latin, or I should say romantic languages, French in particular, those were masculine words. They had le whatever in front of it. Whereas most transportation, ships in particular, were female. They were ascribed to have characteristics of females or feminine characteristics, and structures were male. Examples. You needed to treat your ship well and pay attention to it and take care of it so that it would always bring you home. Or structures were strong and would protect and keep you out of the weather and keep you safe. So, masculine versus feminine characteristics. Gender, traditionally, the term gender was only used to describe these characteristics of nouns and pronouns. But because masculine was so closely associated with the term male, and feminine was so closely associated with the word female, because they described gender described the characteristics of those sexes. When Puritans and Victorians, which are an offshoot of Puritan ideology, did not want to use the word sex to refer to the sexes, they used the term gender interchangeably. There was probably a good deal of the gentry elite that understood the difference and accepted it as a contrivance of language, that to be polite, you didn't want to talk about sex because their puritanical Christian values said not to. And this is very strong, especially in the Protestant churches. Catholics were not nearly as sex negative. As Catholics, once you got married, you hump like bunnies, and you're okay as long as every encounter is open to the possibility of having sex. Why they only ever supported the rhythm method and the body temperature method for birth control is because of that. Not very accurate, and you end up with a lot more Catholics. Protestants, no. You only have sex when you want to have babies. Any other time it's bad, it's evil. You make a baby and you're done. That's it. So there was much more an aversion in Protestant areas for this gender term to be supported in the language. So it was interjected into particularly written word a lot, and proper social customs was to use gender instead of sex, even when you were referring to the sex of an animal. But that's where the confusion comes in, because we have generation after generation of people who have grown up with this erroneous belief that gender and sex are the same thing. They're not. Gender being characteristics of a sex and sex being the sex itself, they're separate. They have large amounts of overlap in as far as their, feminine, for example, describes the expectations, we'll say, or the biological norms of females, and masculine, the biological norms of men. And some of these norms are reinforced socially, but I think they all basically come back from biology, from evolution, if you will. An example would be the idea of the male protector. Well, men are larger and have more muscle mass than women. Men, once the woman is impregnated, are not necessarily necessary to pass those alleles on to the next generation. The female's then responsible for that. So once women were pregnant, they tend to be slower. They tended to have, because they're carrying around more weight, their body is working in different functions. So birthing and raising children really impacted the survival of the female. So the male in that role as father would be the protector and the one who went out and took the risks instead of the female. That norm was encouraged because it made biological sense. That once the female's impregnated, the male is less necessary to the survival and upbringing of the child. Because the woman, once the child is born, she breastfeeds or whatever, every day that the child is alive, it increases its chance of passing on those genes. And if she's not needing to be protected on a day-to-day basis, then she doesn't need the man at that point. She needs someone to provide for her while she's raising the child, which again goes into that protector person then going out and providing as well, again because of that biological difference between the sexes. But gender, unlike how some feminists have taken this term, gender, though, isn't something that you do. It is a description of characteristics of a particular sex. That does not mean that sex is, the end-all, be-all determiner of gender. You can have someone who is biologically male who isn't always feminine. That would be a transgender person. They because of the tie between gender and sex, they've kind of deviated from that, and there's no reason why you can't, or why necessarily you have to fit in with the sex and gender roles. Although the reason that there's such a strong correlation between sex and gender roles is for reproduction, passing on those characteristics to the next generation. Those are more compatible with actually doing that because they fit into the dimorphism of the species more strongly, because there is a biological advantage, an evolutionary advantage to doing so. But mutations occur all over the place, and someone can be born perfectly healthy and normal with a penis and testicles and all the functional parts, but not even decide, but feel or agree or have thoughts that are clearly fitting more with feminine ideals. Much of this is biological. I don't think too many people would argue that transgender people, for example, choose to be a different gender. They choose to cross over from masculine to feminine or feminine to masculine when their biological sex doesn't agree. There are some who are transsexual, who I would consider that a subgroup of transgender. They are so into the opposite gender from when they were born that they want to change as much of their biological makeup to match that other gender as well. But that's a subset of transgender, because transgender is just a state of characteristics. And vice versa. If a woman could decide, tomboys and things like that, who the typical like butch lesbian, certainly more masculine, more masculine personality, character traits, but probably not somebody who ever wants to have a penis, and the I don't necessarily like the term butch lesbian, but I think that's still acceptable. Certainly the more masculine one. They're not interested in having a penis, and their partners aren't interested in them having a penis because that's not what they're interested in. But that's where a lot of the confusion comes in, I think, is because the two groups are so clearly associated with each other that you get confusion over gender and sex being something different. They are technically something different, but they have been used synonymously for a long period of time, particularly in English, particularly in Protestant countries like the US and UK, which both happen to speak English. And we've continued to perpetrate that, especially through more evangelical Protestants who still don't want to talk about sex. Still don't want to talk about just the idea of sex, this sex negativity, if you will. There's confusion between the characteristics and the sex itself. So that, I think, is the real problem here. And to briefly address the gender binary, because gender is a description of sex, I'll say, there are probably really only two genders. I'm not going to sit here and say that people who identify as genderqueer or as there's one where they switch characteristics between one and the other. That's all about association, I want to say. It's about labels. It's not necessarily about gender itself. People who typically call themselves genderqueer, and I will sit here and admit that I don't know that I know a lot of people who are genderqueer. It's about being associated with the labels of masculine or feminine. It's not necessarily about behaving in a masculine or feminine way. It's about the labels. I don't necessarily have a problem with that, but you might have a hard time getting me to use Zer when referring to somebody. Any more than I would expect, someone who like I would have a big problem with someone, you know, referring to me as an atheist. I am an atheist, and I take on that label. You know, I'm liberal, but I don't know that I'd be called libertarian, and someone may try to associate that label with me too because I tend to be very liberal in certain things. Certainly, actually, I'm pretty far off of what the typical libertarian is. I'm not right free, I'm left free, but that's another conversation. So that's it. I don't know if this is a great video or not, but what the hell. It's been a week or so. Had some stuff come up, so you missed a video or two this past week. Oh well. Good thing I never committed to a schedule. That's it. Thanks. Like, comment, share, subscribe to this channel. Tell your friends. Tweet it on Twitter. Especially if you disagree. Come and have at me. Haha. And we'll talk. I'm open to conversation. I only have 8 subs. My video counts are low. I think for all 20-some videos that I've done, I have 360 views total. I don't know how many of those are me clicking on a video to comment on it, but, you know. I'm up to 8 subs, though, so yay! Thanks, guys. Thanks, new subs. You guys, your names don't show up right away. So, like I said, I've had 8 subs for a couple days now, and I'm still only showing 5 in my list. So, whatever. That's it. Thanks, guys. Goodbye, and hello, as always.
If it doesn't,